So, good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoying the beginning of summer. I just want to welcome you either back if you attended our first master plan meeting back in, what was that, April now, and joining us again. And if you're new here, thank you so much for participating. All your voices matter in this process, and it's what really drives this document. So I, want to thank you on behalf of the town for attending today. And if you have any questions after this meeting, any follow-up, please feel free to reach out to me at ecokinda@wakefield.ma.us. I also just wanted to thank our advisory group members that we have here. You'll see a list of their names here. I appreciate all the help that they've provided us over since January, getting this process going, continuing the process, helping us with our survey. So I want to thank them all for being here. I also want to thank our liaisons from the town planning, from the planning board, Theo Noel, and Ann Danahy, town councilor Ann Danahy, representing from the town council. I believe they are both in attendance. So thank you again for your time. I also just want to thank a few of our other town councilors that have joined us today. I know we did have Chair Maureen Butt was going to be joining us, Vice Chair Jonathan Chines, as well as new town councilor Bob Vinson, and then also, as I mentioned, Ann Danahy. I also just want to thank our municipal team, Jen McDonald, who has been very helpful in this process, and she's joining us here as well. We also are joined by MAPC, Carlo Montañez, who is the project manager for this. Naji Nunley, he just joined us at the first meeting last time, so welcome. And then I'd like to thank Christian and Mark, who have also been part of this process as well. So with that being said, again, if you have any questions or want to follow up, just feel free to reach out to me. And I appreciate you all again for taking the time to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin, for that. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Carlos Montañez. I'm a principal planner at MAPC, and I'm the project manager leading the Wakefield master plan process. Wakefield's contracted with MAPC to facilitate this process, to gain input, perform analyses, and ultimately draft a plan report. We're going to take some of your community input and also blend that with recommended best planning practices for your master plan report. Also joining us tonight is Naji from our community engagement specialist team. And as Erin said, on the intro side, we have the names of all of our advisory group members. We thank everyone and our two liaisons, and we thank them for all of the work that they put in at the prior 3 advisory group meetings, as well as input into the survey design. MAPC is the regional planning agency for Greater Boston, and we function like a public consultancy and try to help communities supplement their local planning capacity and have these brainstorming sessions in order to find common solutions to a lot of issues that cross municipal boundaries. MAPC is also a mission-based agency, and on the slides are a few excerpts from our mission statement. We promote smart growth, regional collaboration, equity and diversity as part of also helping to address community concerns that affect people from a variety of backgrounds all across many communities in Greater Boston. Wakefield's master planning process isn't starting from scratch. Since the town recently completed a pre-master plan visioning process, we can all benefit from some of the input from that in the vision statement, as well as some of the priority goals in order to be able to jumpstart our conversations. The visioning was high level, and it gave us great context for be able to be more comprehensive now and detailed about these 8 specific planning topics and be able to make recommendations. Ideally, that master plan report will be consulted during the next 10 years at municipal meetings in order to help guide more immediate decisions on project proposals, as well as decisions on investments. The master plan will make connections between the topics and try to highlight trade-offs. And using community input from the surveys, we hope to be able to identify and prioritize community goals and devise corresponding recommendations. On a more general level, master planning can help communities and provide their residents and businesses with mutual certainty as to what they could possibly expect in terms of public facilities and services, physical improvements, and possibly changes in specific areas of town for either preservation, enhancement, or growth. In addition to relying on existing conditions data and demographics, it's also a fun brainstorming opportunity similar to the visioning. We'll use data, but we'll also rely on community input in order to help shape where Wakefield would like to go by the year 2033. Ultimately, the report may have a lengthy list of goals and recommendations, and we'll try to prioritize them in a certain sequence that makes sense so that Wakefield will be able to slowly, year by year, go checking down the list and make sense of which ones are a priority and in what order to attempt to accomplish them. And hopefully there will be a few very compelling ideas that Wakefield residents can rally around in order to be able to keep alive during future town meetings during the next 10 years. This slide shows the general process timeline with 4 public forums and 5 advisory group working sessions. So far, we've had 3 advisory group working sessions. We've had also a survey subcommittee AG volunteers helping us to collectively draft the survey questions that are paired with tonight's Zoom workshop at the end of the meeting. That survey on those 2 topics will be active for over 3 weeks until July 24th for any and all Wakefield community members. Our AG members will be helping to facilitate some of tonight's small breakout discussion groups after the informational slides. And we've worked with the advisory group in order to be able to draft purposeful survey questions that touch on planning subtopics that can help to provide useful insight into possible master plan goals, and in order to be able to make actionable recommendations in the report. This slide shows the 8 topics and how they've been sequenced over the course of the 4 forums. Each of them will last 2 hours and feature 2 different topics. Should any community member not be able to attend a given workshop, a combination of a 3-week-long online survey on specific topics will be available in order to record your individual input, as well as the PowerPoint slide that we're showing and a recording of the meeting. Our meeting objective for tonight is to present a few minutes of informational slides on a topic before we break out into smaller rooms for facilitated discussion, so that participating community members can hear each other's ideas before we ask everyone after the meeting to take the poll during the next 3 weeks, and dedicate about 15 minutes of your time to providing us with your individual input. As we did with Wakefield's pre-master plan visioning process, we will emphasize to all community members to please take the survey, since the community input that we gain from it will be the primary form of standardized feedback that will allow us to be able to measure community input and be able to determine consensus on a variety of different topics and questions and issues. This slide highlights in yellow the survey link, which actually we're going to have to share another link with you, Erin. So we'll, at the end of the meeting, and I think we'll send an email to everyone out with the correct link. So we apologize for that. The survey will be available for over 3 weeks until July 24th. There's plenty of opportunity. Now we'll briefly cover some context demographics before starting our first topic of the night. This map highlights Wakefield's business districts, neighborhoods, and open spaces. In the center is the downtown area between its 2 prominent lakes. The areas in red are the business retail areas. The areas in purple are zoned for either commercial and/or industrial uses. And the areas in green show the town's open spaces. You can also see the town's 2 commuter rail stations with the small T icon. Wakefield's an established suburban town 10 miles north of Boston. Given that it's a mature community approaching build out, new opportunities for either economic growth and community growth are likely to occur via creative redevelopment and flexible use of underutilized infill properties in town. The town's population has remained relatively stable with a modest 8 to 11% growth since 1960. Of the very few Census 2020 data sets that have been released thus far, we have that Wakefield's population has increased by 8% from 2010. Compared to the county and the region, Wakefield is 16 to 22% less diverse racially. When compared to Middlesex County, Wakefield's median overall housing sales price of approximately $645,000 is 8% more affordable. When compared to Essex County, Wakefield's median housing sales price is 15% more expensive. Looking at its tax base, Wakefield revenue sources overwhelmingly come from residential properties at 80%, and 13% from commercial properties, and 2% from industrial properties. Regarding transportation, Wakefield has 3% higher commute times compared to the state average. In terms of how residents commute, 73% drive alone, while 16% take public transit, carpool, or walk. Lastly, when it comes to different options for getting around, we should consider the mobility needs and challenges of some residents. Approximately 8.6% of residents have limited mobility and difficulty with living independently. The second half of our meeting on housing will have more detailed demographic slides on income. Now we'll move on to our main workshop topics with informational topic slides before each of the discussions and ultimately that post-meeting survey. Our first topic of, oh, I think it went the wrong way. Sorry about that. We got 19. Oh. Sorry about that. Here we go. So our first topic for tonight is historic and cultural resources, which we like to describe less abstractly as thinking about how to celebrate and enhance cultural offerings and assets, as well as expand existing offerings. The purpose of the historic and cultural resources element is to strengthen preservation efforts, acknowledge, celebrate, improve, and support existing assets and offerings, and bring awareness to lesser known assets in town. And explore how possibly Wakefield could consider a new contribution to the landscape for residents today, as well as a legacy for future generations, just as past generations have left present day Wakefield with its current valued assets. As another aspect, this element will also consider the economic development potential of historic and cultural assets for local tourism. For master planning purposes, a historic resource is a public or private physical asset that is somehow meaningful to the local community in terms of history, architecture, or culture. A cultural resource is either a physical asset or an intangible one that adds to the uniqueness or sense of place and local identity. Examples include museums, cultural landmarks, artist studios and theaters, as well as festivals. We're also building upon the community input and the consensus goals from the recently completed Vision 2030 and its vision statement. Highlighted in blue are some of the ideas that can relate to housing and cultural resources. Community consensus among over 1,000 Vision 2030 participants included expanding the social and civic landscape, more creative placemaking amenities, more festive amenities, and possibly investing in a legacy project, such as a lakeside promenade. One One of the 6 priority goals from Vision 2030 also touched on improving Wakefield's assets for historic preservation by considering ideas such as the Community Preservation Act. More information on that idea in upcoming slides. In terms of existing conditions, Wakefield is blessed with many historic and cultural assets, including some of the ones shown on the slide. Possible master plan ideas for this element can include how to celebrate these or try to support them in one way or another, regardless of ownership. Again, this slide shows some additional existing cultural and historic assets to keep in mind for your breakout discussions. In terms of historic assets, Wakefield has 5 National Register districts and 2 historic cultural areas. That NRD designation does not limit the property owner's use of the property unless it has obtained some type of federal funding, licensing, or permitting. On the state's MACRIS inventory of cultural resources, there are approximately 436 properties, excluding the 7 areas mentioned. And according to the Wakefield Historical Commission, that includes 250 properties identified locally as being significant. Wakefield's 5-member historical commission is appointed by the town council. It strives to preserve, protect, and develop Wakefield's architectural and historical assets. It promotes a local historic marker program to bring awareness and recognize historic properties built before 1921. Participation does not place any actual property restrictions. In terms of local historic preservation protections, the Historical Commission also maintains the demolition delay bylaw, providing a 6-month opportunity to study and attempt to protect significant sites. The master plan is an opportunity to also consider cultural resources such as existing entertainment, civic entertainment performance spaces, and how to support them or enhance them for the enjoyment of residents, as well as for their economic development potential for the town. This slide shows 5 of the historic areas in town, near downtown, Lake Quannapowitt, and with Wakefield Park in the west side of town. This slide shows 2 historic areas of town on the Massachusetts Historical Commission's MACRIS inventory, which includes Wakefield's portion of the larger state Breakheart Reservation, as well as the Curtis Gold Camp or Camp Plunkett to the north of town. Moving on to potential opportunities and available resources. Presently, in terms of historic preservation protections, Wakefield has that demolition delay bylaw. Could or should Wakefield consider more robust preservation protections that go beyond the National Register District's recognitions to create a local historic designation, district designation, with property use protections or restrictions for all architectural changes that are visible from the public right-of-way? Another possible idea for enhancing or supporting cultural resources could be applying for the state's Mass Cultural Council program's cultural district designation. And that's an official designation that can qualify an area for small matching grants in order to support activities, branding, as well as signage in the district. The town's Historical Commission also promotes a local historic marker program to showcase properties of significance built before 1921. Participation does not place any restrictions on the property. In terms of ideas for preservation in town, the town could consider as a potential new tool for funding projects, passing the Community Preservation Act, like 189 other communities have, to levy a surcharge of up to 3% to raise money for preserving historic sites. If passed, it can also unlock matching state funding. This slide shows a map of the 199 communities in Massachusetts as of April 2022 that have passed the CPA, color-coded by towns and cities. This slide shows the current fiscal year 2022 funds that have been dispersed to the 189 communities in Massachusetts that have passed the Community Preservation Act. The median local surcharge committed was $562,000, and the median state match was $336,000 that those communities can use for real improvements to preserve historic properties. This slide shows 3 examples of historic preservation projects by CPA communities in Massachusetts. The first example is in Lenox, and it was for the restoration of a historic clock and bell tower. The second example is from Marshfield to preserve a historic house while also creating one affordable housing unit within it. And the third example is from Grafton for creating a canoe launch on a historic site that also serves as a gateway to the town. The Massachusetts Community Preservation Coalition administers and promotes that CPA program, funding program. And on its website, the coalition highlights a possible added benefit to some communities who have passed CPA, with one case study for the city of Northampton's Moody municipal bond rating going up in relation to its CPA passing as well as retention. Moving on to possible ideas and opportunities to consider in your small breakout group discussions are 2 on the slide. Wakefield's past includes the production of locally significant products, such as rattan and toy airplanes. Perhaps the town could consider some of these as possible themes for a new festive event that could become a new tradition in town. Pardon the image on the left. It was easier to find wicker furniture versus rattan for this particular mock-up. Here are 2 other possible ideas for consideration, solely as examples to spark a discussion. And as our final slide before we move on to the first topic's small breakout group discussions, we have another slide here with examples that are part of the survey we would like everyone to take to be able to give us feedback as to which of these ideas do you find compelling. The survey will be live until July 24th, so more than 3 weeks, so that we can be able to measure standardized feedback and figure out which ideas have more traction in Wakefield. I think some of us got cut off in mid-sentence. My group had some really good discussions. I hope yours did as well. So with that, I think Najee's keeping us on track with for our second topic. So thank you for that. All right, so can you guys see my screen or not? Is that a no? Oh, okay.
No, we can.
No.
I'm glad I asked. Okay, where are we? Here we go. Aha. There we go. Visible now?
Yes.
Okay. Awesome. Great. So thank you, everyone. So thank you for that discussion. We're going to move on to our second topic of the night. So tonight's second topic is housing options and residential areas. The purpose of the housing element of a master plan is to explore housing needs and options for all residents. Also to identify ideas for allowing options, considering the preferences and the needs of not just oneself, but fellow community members and family members. Also consider both affordability as well as market rate housing. As part of the purpose, master planning is an excellent opportunity for residents to consider how and where to possibly accommodate options within the not so frequent brainstorming opportunity that master planning presents itself. You don't master plan necessarily every single year. So it's a good opportunity to brainstorm and explore ideas, free of any immediate decision-making, of any immediate existing imminent proposals, in order to set the table for the future, so that when other potential proposals arise, they can benefit from already having some context and master planning in place with some community input and consensus ideas in order to address housing needs and how to evaluate those potential future specific housing proposals. In addition to exploring appropriate potential housing focus areas in town for future more detailed district studies and decisions, the housing element of a master plan explores connections between housing and things like creative transportation strategies, more permissive and flexible zoning regulations, and also the economic development impacts. The housing element does not get into the specifics or details of actual rezonings and other types of housing related analyses or state requirements in terms of capacity analyses. Building on the town's recently completed pre-master plan Vision 2030, the vision and goals state that there was community consensus from over 1,000 participants for things like welcoming and supporting members in different life stages, enhancing neighborhoods with options for all, addressing affordability, promoting inclusiveness, and expanding mixed-use residential within the downtown area. Among one of the 6 priority goals, Vision 2030 participants indicated the goal of addressing the needs of almost 1/3 of all households who pay more than 1/3 of their monthly income on housing costs. Now we'll move on to existing conditions and demographics. Over half of the town's land is currently being used for residential purposes, and only 0.5% is being used for mixed-use residential purposes. 29% is being used for governmental and tax-exempt uses, and 11% is being used for commercial uses. Considering the amount of land that the town has zoned to regulate development, almost 2/3 of zoned land is for single family only. 21% is for general residence, which allows for 2-family dwellings in the Wakefield Center and Greenwood areas of town. This slide shows a simplified aggregate zoning map to more clearly illustrate the amount of land zoned for single residences only. This can affect the amount of land that's available for other housing options for those who want or need them, and therefore it can impact the supply of housing units and housing prices, including affordability. The town's population has increased between 2010 and 2020 by 8.6% to 27,090 residents. However, best available projections indicate an anticipated decline of 3.6% through 2030 and 2040. Wakefield's population has aged recently between 2010 and 2020 by 8%. Best available projections indicate an additional projected increase in aging by 5%. In terms of housing stock, 61% is single family, 16% are for 2 families, 11% are small multifamily properties between 3 and 9 units. In terms of larger multifamily properties with 20 or more units, Wakefield has 10% of its housing stock in that and is tied for a second lowest place in comparison to adjacent communities and the sub-region. Almost 3/4 of Wakefield households are owners, which is comparable to more immediate communities. However, Wakefield has more owner households and fewer renter households than Essex and Middlesex counties by 9 to 11%. In terms of households, family households with children make up 31% of Wakefield's households, while the overwhelming majority at 69% are other households. These figures are comparable to the comparison areas. In terms of school enrollment, there had been an increase of 5.7% between 2014 and 2017, but there has been a more recent decrease of 6.5% between 2017 and 2021. In terms of condo and single family sales prices, Wakefield condos cost 27% less than single families in 2022, with single families at approximately $703,000 and condos at approximately $512,000. When compared to Essex and Middlesex counties, Wakefield overall is 8% more affordable than Middlesex, but it's 15% more expensive than Essex County. In terms of rents, Wakefield's approximately $1,500 median gross rent is the third most affordable when compared to adjacent communities. Looking at cost-burdened households who pay more than a third of monthly income on housing, approximately 25% to 36% of all households are cost-burdened, with renter householders being more impacted. In terms of poverty, 3 to 4% of Wakefield family households are classified as being in poverty. For context, a 2-adult, 2-child household qualifies for poverty status at approximately $27,000 or below. Overall, Wakefield has fewer family households in poverty than comparison areas rather. Looking at median household incomes, the town's overall median is $103,000, with a higher family median household income of $130,000 and a lower non-family one of almost $63,000. Wakefield's overall median and family median income, household income, is lower than the subregion and Middlesex County. Looking at the state's subsidized housing inventory, or SHI, Wakefield's currently is at 6.7%, according to the official state DHCD, that's the Department of Housing and Community Development inventory. It is the second lowest of adjacent communities. The state has a minimum requirement of 10% for all Commonwealth communities in order for all communities to contribute to the widespread regional and statewide housing affordability issue, so that no single community has to do so. In order for Wakefield to address the 343 unit affordability gap, according to Massachusetts DHCD, it would need to produce 52 units a year to demonstrate progress to the state and have local control over potential outside multifamily proposals. As an example of what a qualifying income would be for an affordable home, at the 80% level of area median income, a single person household qualifies up to $70,750 in income, while a 4-person household qualifies at approximately $101,000 of income. Beyond striving to increase the town's existing 6.7% SHI, it's also important for communities to monitor any existing units on the inventory that might be expiring in order to ensure that they remain on the inventory, and so as to not further impact the town's current 6.7 SHI figure. This slide is just an FYI that there is limited data availability from the full 2020 census, and that once the full 2020 census figures are released, believe it or not, in 2023, DHCD will then be able to update the denominator for that new SHI calculation for the town and all communities in Massachusetts. When we speak of housing options, This slide shows other types of housing that communities could consider to allow within the land use regulations tables of their existing zoning districts. The options are intended not only for oneself, but also for people of all ages to accommodate changing preferences and also for any unanticipated changes in life circumstances. The town's 2015-2020 housing production plan highlighted a few issues, including an aging population, stark contrast in median incomes, and lower housing growth than comparison communities. The HVP also highlighted the need for more options for things such as the ability to downsize, buying up, being able to even enter the market in the first place, and to also avoid being priced out of the community. As alluded to before, residential zoning regulations control the supply of housing options and can affect affordability. Proactively identifying appropriate focus areas for more detailed future studies for growth can help the town to contextualize any future proposals when they arise at meetings during the next 10 years of the master plan horizon, with an opportunity to be able to refer to the community consensus results for context and decision-making at those meetings in the future. Moving on to opportunities and ideas, this slide shows again some possible housing types you could consider for your discussion, as well as a map of the general downtown area that some Vision 2030 participants considered for expanded mixed-use options, as well as that State Community Preservation Act resource that's available to communities. For your consideration and discussion, here are some of those highlights again from the vision statement, as well as two maps with the general residence and business districts in Wakefield for consideration in trying to identify where housing could be accommodated in order to determine future more detailed studies for that. Just as we summarized during tonight's first topic, Community Preservation Act or CPA funding can not only provide funds for historic preservation, but also for supporting housing affordability. Here are some examples of Community Preservation Act or CPA housing projects with two communities who received matching state funding. The Manchester example is for 415,000 additional CPA funds to support SHI or subsidized housing qualifying restrictions for a 39-unit residential building in order to support housing affordability in Manchester. The other example is in Wellfleet, and it's for supporting the construction of a 5-unit veterans home. This slide shows some potential ideas and tools for addressing housing options and affordability. They include locally initiated, expanded mixed-use residential districts to leverage limited available land in town. Also, the state's Chapter 40R Smart Growth Overlay District is another tool for mixed-use residential zoning that also provides communities with financial incentives as well. Another tool or approach involves expanding options by tweaking the existing land use regulations tables of existing zoning districts in order to be more permissive with different housing types. Inclusionary zoning is another tool that communities such as Wakefield, I think Wakefield has inclusionary zoning, is another tool available in zoning to require certain projects to include a certain percent of affordable units interspersed among the market rate units. And lastly, we allude also to housing production plans, which the town has an expired one from 2015 to 2020. And it's a tool that many communities use in order to proactively identify which sites in town are appropriate for affordable housing and multifamily proposals, market and affordable, in order to meet that state DHCD Chapter 40B requirement that's tied to that 6.7% subsidized housing inventory figure that we've alluded to before. Let's see here. In addition to housing options, one can also consider improvements and amenities in residential areas in town. This slide shows some examples. They include improved pedestrian-friendly amenities to encourage walking, as well as ideas for encouraging biking. Traditional community bulletin boards located centrally in different neighborhood locations is another idea for promoting social cohesion in town. Lastly, this slide shows on-demand micro transit ideas for circulating shuttle vans between neighborhoods, business districts, and last mile connections to the town's 2 commuter rail stations. We have 2 more example slides of possible neighborhood amenities for your breakout discussions and consideration. This slide shows some very small pocket parks as well as small pocket gardens that could potentially be located in different residential areas in town. And this last slide shows how small neighborhood retail could be incorporated for convenience trips on foot in different neighborhood areas. And with that, we'll move on to our second discussion of the night on housing. All right, thank you everyone for those discussions. I know ours was a little different than the first topic, but we got some good input on that. So I think we had an issue with the survey link, Aaron, so we're going to share out, there's a new link. I had a different link on these slides. Yeah.
Yep, so Jen has been updated, so we'll update any material. I don't think we've had the survey link anywhere other than this presentation today.
Okay.
So I'll make sure, Najee, I don't know if that one's live that you sent. I don't know if we want to put that in the chat box for right now, and then we'll update everything else by tomorrow.
Correct. Yep. So I just dropped the new link in the chat. Should be active. You shouldn't have any issues accessing it.
All right. So please disregard the link that's in the presentation. It's saying what we say. Okay.
Aaron, are you going to email it to everybody? Is that what you intend to do?
I can email. I have everyone that registered. I can shoot an email tonight or first thing tomorrow.
Okay.
We're waiting on the presentation, but I have no problem doing that as well.
Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. So we will be in touch with figuring out when the next and third public forum will occur on different topics. I think it's transportation, if I'm not correct, in another topic, but don't quote me on that. And then we'll figure out, so what we want also now to encourage everyone to take the survey during the next 3 weeks, because that is really going to be helpful for us to get like deep, rich data to be able to figure out consensus and which ideas are rising to the top for both historic and housing in Wakefield. So I want to thank everyone for participating and spread the word on the survey, and stay tuned for the third workshop as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate it. And to echo what Carlos said, please share the link. I know there's never a good time for meetings. People have stuff going on with their kids, family, but the information, if they weren't able to attend, they could provide information through that link as well, or that survey as well, would be super helpful. And I just want to thank all of you again for taking the time tonight to join us. We really appreciate it. I love these conversations.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks so much.
Bye.